Frances Gill is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. She's on the National Political Committee. She's a MD with the County of Los Angeles here in Los Angeles. Thank you very much for taking the time. So listen, we'd like to know a little bit more about DSA. A lot of people have been surprised by this organization. Define it for us. What is it all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Democratic Socialists of America is a mass membership political organization of working people who are fighting to advance a politics that makes life better for everyday folks.
And you've done quite well in some blue cities. It wasn't a DSA candidate who won the primary for the Democrats in Michigan, but he was close. Explain why you're seeing such success.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a few different reasons. One is the political moment that we're living in. People are struggling. Working people are struggling to meet everyday needs. So things like affording childcare and the cost of food, the cost of gas. People are feeling that, and so they're feeling that stress and that frustration and looking for change. I think also the candidates that we're running are folks that are coming from a very authentic and genuine place and really want to fight and to fight for change. And I think that's something that people are hungry for, is to see leaders who are really ready to fight and ready to win. And I think our politics also just speak to folks. And then the other thing I would just mention is that we're a member-run organization. The work that we do is almost entirely run by volunteers, and so people are really energized and ready to fight, and I think that's something that's pretty unique in the political landscape in America. Right.
There are plenty of people who point to some very controversial positions that DSA takes. Let's talk about some of them. Your policy agenda on law enforcement is to defund police, ultimately to get rid of police departments, correct?
Well, what I would say is that we're dramatically overspending on police right now.
I understand, but the goal is to defund the police departments so we don't need them in the future.
I think what we really want to see is a horizon where folks are not reliant on armed enforcement to meet our public safety needs.
Right.
What's up, family? So we got this clip making rounds from LA News where a DSA representative, as you guys see, sat down for an interview and got exposed by nothing more than basic questions, as you can see so far. I mean, basic, the kind of questions you or I would ask if somebody came to our door promising to fix everything. And the whole thing fell apart in real time, and we're going to break this down and look at the different perspectives, and then I'll give my thoughts. But first, hit the like button, share this video, subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. So here's the setup. A woman named Frances Gill, who's on the National Political Committee of the Democratic Socialists of America, sits down with NBC Los Angeles reporter Conan Nolan, right? And right from the start, Nolan asks straightforward questions. Nothing aggressive, nothing misleading. He says, define the DSA for us. And she gives the polished answer. Mass membership organization fighting to make life better for everyday folks. Authentic candidates, volunteer run. Sounds good, sounds inspiring. Then Nolan starts asking about actual policies on the DSA website. And that's where the cracks start showing. He asks about defunding the police, which we just heard. And paying attention, I want you to continue to pay close attention to how this goes, because Nolan says your policy agenda on law enforcement is to defund the police, ultimately to get rid of police departments, correct? And she says we are dramatically overspending on police right now. Nolan doesn't let her dodge. He says, I understand, but the goal is to defund the police department, so we don't need them in the future. She says, we want to see a horizon where folks are not reliant on armed enforcement to meet our public safety needs. Then Nolan asks the question that dismantles the whole argument. He says, if my daughter is assaulted and raped, is there any agency that would seek to find her assailant and bring him to justice? She says, of course, absolutely. Then he asks police, and where would he be if not in jail? And watch what happens. She stumbles. She says, I really want to avoid getting caught into these hypotheticals. Then she starts talking about streetlights and mental health care and substance use treatment. Streetlights. When asked where a violent criminal goes, if not a jail, her answer is streetlights.
But it says defund police on the website. That's your goal. And also to get rid of prisons and jails, correct?
Yes.
So if my daughter is assaulted and raped, is there any agency that would seek to find her assailant and bring him to justice?
Of course. Yeah, of course.
What
absolutely.
would it be if not police, and where would he be if not a jail?
So I guess I really want to avoid getting kind of caught into these hypotheticals and talk more about the reality that we're actually facing right now, which is that we're spending in absolutely outrageous amounts of money on police and policing, and we're not spending money on things that actually make people safe and feel safe, which is things like actually well-lit streets. The streetlights in Los Angeles, everybody agrees it's a huge problem.
Now, let me pause and acknowledge something. To be fair, there are legitimate conversations to have about police reform. Nobody with any sense thinks the system is perfect. There are valid arguments about redirecting some funding to mental health services and community programs. I'm not saying every police department spends every dollar perfectly, but here's where the logic breaks down. You cannot replace armed law enforcement with streetlights. That's not a policy, that's a wish. And when you're running for office or representing a national political organization, wishes don't count, results do. And here's what this actually looks like in real life. You live in a neighborhood where crime is a concern. Maybe your car got broken into last year. Maybe there's been a string of robberies a few blocks over. You want to feel safe walking your dog at night. You want to know you want to know that if something happens, somebody with authority and training will show up. Now imagine your city council member tells you they're defunding the police and putting the money into streetlights and mental health hotlines. You ask them, okay, who shows up when somebody breaks into someone's house at 2 a.m.? And they say, well, we're working on alternative response models. You say, who stops the person who just robbed them from running away? And they say, we need to address root causes. At some point, you realize they don't have an answer. They have slogans, and slogans don't stop crime. Let me give you the data, all right? The Stanford study on San Francisco rent control is one of the most cited papers on this topic. And here's what it found. All right. When San Francisco expanded rent control, it did help existing tenants, people who already had rent control apartments, stay in their homes longer. That's the good part. But here's what else happened. Landlords who were affected by rent control reduced the rental housing supply by 15%. They converted units, sold buildings, stopped renting. And that 15% reduction in supply caused a 5.1% increase in rent across the entire city. So the people who already had rent control benefited, but everybody else, especially new renters trying to find a place, paid higher rents because there was less housing available. All right. The St. Louis Federal Reserve confirmed this in a 2024 analysis. They said rent control policies do restrict rents at more affordable rates for some tenants, but they also led to a reduction of rental stock and maintenance, which makes the housing shortage worse for everybody else. That's not a conservative think tank making that argument. That's the Federal Reserve. Now, to apply that same logic to police defunding. If you reduce funding for police, response times go up. If response times goes up, criminals have more time to commit crimes and get away. If criminals face less consequences, more people commit crimes. That's not a theory. That's basic cause and effect. And the people who pay the price for that are not the politicians making the decisions. They live in neighborhoods with private security and gated communities. And the people who pay the price are the working families in high crime areas who can't afford to move. And the same people the DSA claims to be fighting for. Then Nolan moves into another topic. He asks about the DSA's position on immigration and border security. And watch her answer. She says things like the U.S. helps propagate conditions across the globe that drive immigration. We need a system that's fair for people across the globe. And Nolan says, you want to get rid of ICE? What agency takes their place to secure the border? And she says, I don't really understand why we constantly get pinned on these particular questions when the immediate reality is that immigration enforcement is absolutely out of control. Think about that for a second. A representative of a national political organization says she doesn't understand why people keep asking about border security. Because it's one of the top issues in the country. Because 40 million people crossed the border illegally in 4 years. Because American voters, including Hispanic voters and black voters, who the DSA claims to represent, listed immigration as their number one issue in the last election. And she doesn't understand why people keep asking.
Things like mental health care and substance use treatment. So things that drive people to commit crimes and to that make our society less safe. We're not doing anything about the root causes, and instead we're funneling money into the police.
Abdul al-Sayed's victory in the Democratic primary in the Senate in Michigan. Of the 15 counties where a majority do not have a college degree, he lost every one of them, over 15. In the counties with high education, like you, he won. So how can you say you're for the working class when working class counties in Detroit and elsewhere voted against your candidate?
I think what we're seeing is that people who are highly educated in this country were promised this path of economic success. If you go to college, if you get the degree, if you go down that path, you're going to be guaranteed economic success. But really, what we're seeing is that there's this huge downward mobility problem, where people are putting in the money, taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans. I have $500,000 in student loan.
That's your choice. You decided to take out and you got a degree that didn't translate into viable skills into the workplace. And that's what the DSA is made of. Angry bachelor degree attaining students who have basket weaving degrees that actually is mad at the world for the decisions they made to get these degrees stacked up in loans, and it's not translating to them getting a job. So now they want to just get rid of the whole system in regards to building yourself up and lifting yourself up and grabbing yourself by your bootstraps and getting to work. But the reality is they got degrees that doesn't translate into being successful in corporate America. So now they want to destroy the corporate America, or anybody who made the right choices wisely, choosing the skills that's actually viable to America and actually viable when it comes to the workforce. So since they're mad about that it didn't benefit them, they want to get rid of it and acting like they're helping everybody else and generalize it in the name of helping the working class people. The DSA is made of angry bachelor's degrees with student loans who want student loan forgiveness based on their choices they made and to whatever degree that they decide to get.
Debt personally, and not seeing that translate into actual economic success, because our society, the scales are so tipped in one direction to benefit the rich and the wealthy.
The DSA also wants to get rid of the border. Is that right?
What we talk about is an
It's very contradiction, because she's saying basically they got degrees that economically didn't tip in a way that benefited them because it only helps the wealthy and the rich. Well, for those who acquired wealth or got wealthy, they had to solve a problem in exchange for whatever. They had to give a solution to a problem that was ever they had to give a solution to a problem that needed to be solved in the market, in which they closed that gap to solve it, presenting a solution, which then translated into wealth, which doesn't happen overnight. That's like anybody with a successful business, for example. You have to find something in regards of a problem and you solve it, and then the customer pays for convenience because you solved a problem that they had all along, and then in hopes that you translate wealth based on how successful that product is, and then you keep expanding, evolving with the times to continue to make sure that you're supporting your base and solving something that was viable enough to be solved by taking care of the problem. Give an example. How do you think DoorDash became successful? Uber Eats, all of these, carriers were okay. You may be busy and don't have time to go to a drive-through. You may be at one place and you still need to eat. So you actually have these rideshare companies and these third-party apps that became successful in the name of selling convenience, because the problem was I can't be two places at once, but I really need to focus my attention here, but I'm really hungry and I need food, so I can have somebody deliver it to me and I don't have to choose from selected places that only do delivery, because I have an app that can deliver from anywhere. And then the company said, okay, well, we'll work with other companies if they get on our app, and then we'll take a percentage of the monies that was made from utilizing their services in that app. We'll put your company out there where you deliver food, where you make food, and we'll deliver it in exchange for you making a profit and paying for a subscription on our app to use our services that we keep up to date. And in exchange, Uber Eats or DoorDash gets a cut, or Grubhub. So you just have to solve a problem within the market, and that will actually help you get wealthy over time. Now, and is it promised? Nothing is promised. But if you work hard enough and figure out and continue to iron sharpen iron, or sharpen and perfect your craft, eventually wealth will be acquired over time. It doesn't happen overnight.
immigration system that is actually fair for people across the globe, and recognizing the reality that a lot of immigration is driven by conditions that the U.S. has helped to propagate across the globe. So, we don't talk. It's similar to the conversation.
Would there be border security? You get rid of ICE. We know that.
Yeah,
you get
absolutely.
Would there be any other agency to take their place that would secure the border or enforce border control?
I guess I don't really understand why we kind of constantly get pinned on these particular questions when the immediate reality of the situation is that immigration enforcement is absolutely out of control, needs to be addressed immediately, and we know that in Los Angeles, like more than almost any other city in the country. So it's hard for me to take in good faith the questions around like, are you going to open the borders tomorrow? When the reality is we're so far from that right now, and that needs to be addressed.
The reality is Donald Trump got elected because we opened up the border. That's the reality, and that's the problem.
Well, I mean, I would disagree with that.
Well, Hispanic voters, male Hispanic voters voted in record numbers for Donald Trump. In fact, a majority voted for Donald Trump. Democratic Party lost support with black and Hispanic and young voters, and every indication is that immigration had something to do with that. You dispute that?
I would absolutely dispute the claim that we opened the borders under Joe Biden, and I would absolutely dispute the claim that that is why Donald Trump got elected a second time. I think what is happening is that we're concentrating wealth in the hands of the few. That's without a doubt what's happening, and that's creating wildly unequal economic conditions. That's creating a totally unstable political system. You
decided not to endorse Nithya Raman, who's a DSA member for mayor of Los Angeles. You recommend her, but you won't endorse her using the resources of your organization. Why is that?
Well, our endorsement process for the general is still underway, actually. So we had an endorsement process.
So you can still endorse her?
It's still possible, yeah.
Right. Do you see a problem with her? I mean, she hasn't talked about Israel in the campaign. She has talked about reforming ULA, which is the mansion tax, in order to. Are those problems for you?
Well, like I said, we have a really robust internal democratic process. It's actively underway, and so
we're going to leave it there. Nolan brought up Donald Trump. He won Hispanic voters in record numbers, that the Democratic Party lost support with black, Hispanic, and young voters, and immigration was a major factor. And she says, I would absolutely dispute the claim that we opened the borders under Joe Biden. But here's the thing, family. You could dispute the word open all you want. But when border encounters hit record highs, when cities like New York, Chicago, and Denver declare states of emergency over the influx, when the number of illegal crossings exceeded the population of entire states, the word you use to describe it doesn't change what happened. You could call it a glass half full, but if the glass is spilling onto the floor, nobody cares what you call it. Now, to be fair, there's a legitimate debate about immigration policy. There are people of good faith on both sides who want a system that's both humane and orderly. But when a DSA representative can't even acknowledge the basic reality that millions of people crossing the border create a real problem for American communities and instead deflects by saying we concentrate wealth in the hands of the few, that's not a serious answer. That's a dodge. And voters see it, and then Nolan asks about something even more revealing, because he asks about the DSA's own candidate for mayor of Los Angeles, Nithya Raman, as you heard, who is a DSA member. He says you recommended her, but you won't endorse her using resources of your organization. Why? And she says, our endorsement process is still underway. Nolan says, do you see a problem with her? She hasn't talked about Israel in the campaign. And she says, we have a robust internal democratic process, right? She can't even explain why her own organization won't fully back its own member running for the mayor of the city where this interview is happening. And that's not a gotcha question. That's a basic question about internal consistency. And she had nothing. But here's what the bigger picture looks like. This interview is a microcosm of a larger problem. You have a political movement that runs on big promises: free healthcare, free college, free housing, defund the police, open borders, abolish ICE. And when somebody asks how any of this actually works, the answer is always a dodge. When you need to address root causes, we need to have robust internal process. We need to avoid getting caught in hypotheticals. But those hypotheticals are real life. The great victim whose attacker needs to go somewhere is not a hypothetical. The family trying to find an apartment they can afford is not a hypothetical. The city overwhelmed by a surge in immigration is not a hypothetical. These are real situations that real people deal with every day. And if you can't explain how your policies handle those situations, you are not ready to govern. From my perspective, the disconnect comes down to a few things. First, there's a lack of real world experience. A lot of these candidates come from activist backgrounds, not from running businesses, managing budgets, or dealing with consequences of policy decisions. They're just a bunch of angry birds, metaphorically, They're a bunch of, because I'm thinking of the cartoon or the cartoon or the game. They're a bunch of angry birds or angry individuals who are basically together in a coalition who had bachelor's degrees and got educated. And shout out to them for getting their education to have the courage to stick it through and commit to 4 years to get in a degree, et cetera, et cetera. But the simple fact is they're just mad because their skills didn't translate into the way they wanted to be. So now they want to just destroy the system of success. They want to destroy it. Okay, it didn't benefit me, so we need to get rid of it. We need to get rid of capitalism. Any of those who were successful, I need to take a cut of their success. Other than that, their success is deemed evil. They shouldn't be successful. And if they're so successful and they're making so much money and they're not limited or they're not capped based on their success or how much money they make, then we need to equalize it and spread it across others because their success should be mine as well when you didn't put the work in. So demonize hard work because I worked to get a degree that didn't translate to real skills. So we need to punish the wealthy and we need to push out businesses that creates opportunity and we need to get rid of all of it and we need to just get free, free, free. Angry birds, right? Angry birds. They spend years in spaces where ideological purity matters more than practical results. And when they get in front of a camera and face real questions, they don't have the muscle memory to give honest answers because they never had to. As I say, it's like a game. The game Angry Birds. I'm sure you guys know what Angry Birds is, right? Just angry. Look, just angry. Second, there's a refusal to acknowledge trade-offs. Every policy has trade-offs. Every dollar you spend on one thing is a dollar you can't spend on something else. Every regulation that protects one group creates a cost for another group. Francis Gill here on the screen, part of the Democratic Socialists of America, doesn't understand that. But the DSA's entire pitch is that we can have everything we want if we just tax the rich hard enough. And that's not true. Think about it like this. U.S. healthcare spending hit $5.3 trillion in 2024. That's 18% of the entire economy. More than $15,000 per person. Now the DSA wants Medicare for all. Multiple studies estimate the cost of a single payer system at somewhere between $34 trillion and $47 trillion over 10 years. The more the government keep printing money, that's what causes inflation. Inflation starts with Washington, and it started and will. Washington creates inflation, okay? And the more they print money in the name of free, that's what it's going to cost. The combined net worth of every billionaire in America is around $5 trillion. $5 trillion. So even if you took every dime from every billionaire, you'll cover maybe a year and a half of the program. Then what? You raise taxes on the middle class? That's the math. You can't wish it away. You can't slogan your way around arithmetic. Same thing with housing. Affordable rental housing shortage is 7.3 million units, according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition. Rental vacancy rates hit 5.6% in 2021, the lowest since 1984. So you have a supply problem. Rent control makes that supply problem worse because it disincentivizes building and maintaining rental properties. Every study across the political spectrum agrees on that. Every liberal economist like Paul Krugman have acknowledged that rent control reduces housing supply. So the policy that sounds compassionate on a bumper sticker actually makes the problem worse for the people it's supposed to help. And this is the pattern. The policies sound good, they feel good, they generate applause at rallies and likes on social media. But when you trace out the actual consequences, the people who benefit are often not the people the movement claims to represent. The people who benefit from rent control are existing tenants and control units, not the young family trying to move into the city. The people who benefit from defunding the police are politicians who get to signal virtue, not the working class neighborhood dealing with rising crime. The people who benefit from open borders are employers who want cheap labor, not the American workers competing for jobs or the communities overwhelmed by the cost of providing services. And here's where it gets personal. I say this as somebody who genuinely wants to see people helped. I want affordable housing. I want everybody to have access to healthcare. I want communities to be safe. I want immigration system that's fair and functional. But good intentions without good policy are just expensive mistakes. And the people who pay for our mistakes are always the same people. Working families, low-income communities, people who can't afford to absorb the cost of failed experiments. Look at what happened in cities that actually tried some of these policies. San Francisco spent billions on homeless services, and the problem got worse. Los Angeles spent billions. Oakland, Portland, Chicago, these aren't red states. These are deep blue cities where progressive policies have been in control for decades, and the outcome speaks for themselves. You can't blame the results on conservatives when you've been running the show the whole time. And I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying every Democrat is like this. I'm not saying there aren't serious Republicans with bad ideas too. But there's a specific strand of progressive politics that has taken over the DSA and the squad wing of the Democratic Party that operates on a different relationship with reality. They've convinced themselves that the laws of economics don't apply to them. That if they want something badly enough, they can make it happen by passing a law and printing money, which causes inflation in Washington, where inflation is created and starts and always has started and always caused inflation. And that's not how the world works. So the anchor in that interview, Conan Nolan, deserves some credit here. He asked hard questions without being rude. He didn't shout. He didn't interrupt. He just kept asking the obvious follow-ups. And every time the answer got weaker, every time the deflection got more obvious. That's what happened when the ideology meets reality. Reality wins every time. So here's what I want you to take from this. Number one, listen to how people answer questions. Not what they say, but how they say it. If they keep repeating slogans instead of explaining mechanisms, that's a red flag. If they can't give you a straight answer about how something works, it's probably because it doesn't work. Number two, pay attention to the local news interviews like this. National media tends to protect certain politicians. Local reporters are more likely, I'm going to say more likely. I'm not going to say all or not likely or less likely, more likely to ask real questions. That's where you see the truth. Number three, stop being impressed by promise and start demanding plans. Anybody can promise free stuff. You seen in New York when it came to free busing, where is that? The question is how it gets paid for and what it costs and unintended consequences. And here's the scripture that fits this. Luke chapter 14, verses 28 through 30. Jesus says, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost? Rather, he have the sufficient to finish it. Less happily after he have laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold, it began to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish." That's the whole DSA problem in one verse. They're building a tower. I'm going to translate this simply, or at least they're promising to build one: free healthcare, free housing, free college, safe communities, without police, an open border that somehow doesn't cause problems. But they never sit down and count the costs, and they never ask whether they have sufficient resources to finish what they're starting. And when the foundation gets laid and the money runs out and the problems start piling up, the people who believe them are left standing there watching the unfinished tower. That's basically what the scripture is saying. Wondering what went wrong. And that's the tragedy of this whole movement. Not that they tried and failed, but that they never honestly counted the cost before they started promising the world. And for those of you who don't connect with scripture, here's a life wisdom. Before you commit to any big decision in life, sit down and count the cost. Whether it's a business, a relationship, a career move, or a vote for a candidate promising big changes. Ask yourself what it really takes to make it work. If the person selling you the dream can explain the practical steps to get there, they're selling you a fantasy. And fantasies have a way of turning into nightmares for the people who believe in them most. So that's the breakdown, family. A Democratic Socialist got asked basic questions on LA News and couldn't answer them. Not because the questions were unfair, not because the reporter was biased, but because the ideas don't hold up when you have to explain how they actually work. And that's something every voter, no matter what party you belong to, needs to pay attention to. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think she answered the questions? Was the reporter fair? What would you have asked her? Hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your post notifications, spread the peace, love, and positivity, and let the love supersede the hate, family. I'll catch you in the next one. Hope you guys like some of the humor in this video. I tried to, metaphorically connect it to Angry Birds. I just thought of that game in that movie because my child likes the Angry Bird movie. So I don't know. They're Angry Birds, right? You see the picture. So hopefully you like the humor. Hopefully you got it. Catch you next one. Peace, family.